Welcome, everyone. Wonderful to have you here. It is my great pleasure to introduce Jonathan P. Costa Sr. He is the Executive Director of Ed Advance in Litchfield, Connecticut. His experience and practice have been informed by time spent in secondary history instruction, district curriculum development, for-profit corporate management, executive leadership, and consulting. Since 1990, Jonathan's work has taken him to over 150 districts in the tri-state area. The primary focus of Jonathan's current practice is assisting districts in their planning to prepare students for a world being transformed by artificial intelligence. He is the author of the Corwin Press book, Digital Learning for All, former vice chair of the Litchfield Board of Education, served on the Commission for International Education, and has led international school accreditation visits on 5 continents. It is an honor to welcome my colleague and friend, Jonathan Costa, to provide our mini keynote address. Jonathan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So much, Lynn. So it's always frightening to start the share, but we're going to try and let me know if you see a slide that looks like that. Are we good?
We're
All
good.
right. So get ready for the 15-minute AI fire hose. It's coming at you. So um, one thing that Lynn was too kind to tell you is that I'm an old person, right? So this is my 40th back to school year. And my first teaching job was in a school with a mimeograph and 2 smoking areas, one for kids and one for teachers. So that'll tell you how old I actually am. And I have seen these 4 waves of disruption roll through public school. And uh, I'm here to tell you from my vantage point, all 3 combined will have no impact compared to what the AI world will do to the business of schooling, the process of schooling, and the goals of schooling. Um, so I'm going to give you 3 really quick big ideas for this afternoon. One, this is the end of the era of rote learning. Uh, Even if you could convince me through research that that is the best way to train a mind to think, you will never sell it to a generation of kids who know how to use these tools. And if you're going to measure anything in a classroom that makes a difference, it's going to be the amount of time kids spend on higher order cognitive engagement. Nothing else will matter. And how they use these tools to support that is probably our primary mission going forward. The other thing that's unusual about this is whatever you're seeing right now is just the beginning, not the end of this process. And finally, in order to future-proof kids for the era of AI, they must be able to continuously learn on their own. I don't think there's any other way around it. And so I'm going to spend just a couple minutes explaining why I think these 3 things are true and leave you with a pathway on how to address them. Well, obviously, I'm sure you all know about what this is. Generative AI is a giant synthesis machine, first with text, then with vision, now with moving. I mean, essentially taking everything that man has created and reassembling it in ways that make sense for the user. It is really a remarkable thing to watch. And I'm sure you've seen examples. I'm going to give you about a 5-minute interaction with ChatGPT 4 in a context of a school just to set the tone. So I need a essay on cell mitosis. That's great. How about 10 spelling errors and make it look like an 8th grader wrote it? Cool. How about Mandarin? Thank you. I need a model too. Can you give me a visual? Yeah, no one will believe I did that. Make it look like a kindergartner did it with finger paints. Oh, excellent. And how about 3 dimensions? Can you do that for me too? And I really like Broadway, so give it to me as a song. I'll bet you're not hearing that, are you? I forgot to tap share sound. That is my fault. We're going to do something else here. Hang on. I should have known better. For your listening pleasure. All
We're
right.
now looking at one of your desktops with your email open.
Oh, just making sure you had the link.
Yep.
That's why it didn't work. There we go. Are you seeing it can't do that?
Yes.
Except great. Until it can. That's the whole thing. So this is a moving target, and give me a thumbs up if you can hear this. So essentially what we're seeing is the progression of AI models in terms of capacity and intelligence.
The wriggling worm in its cave is ugly, but spins art despite it. The weathered advice of old maids says that in a pinch you should bite it. Though it might send a fool to his untimely grave, it's tyrant's bane for the bold and the brave. This is a riddle. What's the answer?
Using ChatGPT's 4.0 model, the AI was unable to successfully solve the riddle. Prompting with the same riddle using the 4.01 preview model, this model uses a chain of thought reasoning, and you can see it actively moving through the reasoning and planning process. You can also see the model reflecting on its findings, revising its approach and strategizing to find the correct result. And by doing that, was able to successfully solve the riddle.
So as capacity grows, the tasks available are just growing exponentially. And this leads to incredible things in terms of what kids know they can do with it, what adults know they can do with it, and how it impacts the future of economic opportunity. And while we are not solely in the business of preparing kids for their future in work, it is a key part of our business. And this is going to impact the future of learning and work. And so it is incumbent on us to help educators think about how to prepare kids who are going to live and work in an era of AI. And right around the corner are explosive developments in voice, vision, and virtual reality. And when you take the foundational capacity of AI chatbots, combine them with the ability to see and comprehend and create virtual worlds, you really are looking at a complete transformation of the learning environment. I was in Seattle this past weekend on a family trip, sitting in a restaurant. My wife asked me, "Wow, that's an amazing tree. I wonder what that is." Took a picture of it with ChatGPT. It told me the history of it, told me why it was planted there. I mean, it's just goes on and on. And so you get things like fridge leftovers AI. Take a picture of your fridge. It'll inventory what's in it. Click on the items you want to get rid of, and it will generate recipes for you. It will just redo everything. And again, this is not just the beginning, and it's not the finish. Everything is going to change. And one of its biggest impacts is going to be on the future of economic opportunity. And driven by the pursuit of capital, we're in the early phase of an economic transformation that'll really redefine what it means to be employed and upend our essential understandings of what it means to be prepared for learning and work. Robots and algorithms were already displacing routinized labor. When you add chain of thought reasoning, the number of jobs that'll be impacted really grows exponentially.
I believe about 50% of jobs will be somewhat or extremely threatened by AI in the next 15 years or so.
Kai-Fu Lee also makes a great deal of money from AI. What separates him from most of his colleagues is that he's frank about its downside.
Yes, we've made about 40 investments in AI. I think based on these 40 investments, most of them are not impacting human jobs. They're creating value, making high margins, inventing a new model. But I could list 7 or 8 that would lead to a very clear displacement of human jobs.
So shallow skilled non-strategic work is already at risk, and this list is going to grow. And, is it going to be the end of lawyers? No, it's not, but it is clearly going to be the end of lawyers who don't use it. This is Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, the group behind ChatGPT, who just this last weekend raised another $40 billion.
My belief is that all repetitive human work that doesn't require the deep emotional connection between two people, that will all be done in the next couple of decades, better, cheaper, faster by AI. And that is somehow left out of the conversation. It's always about factory robots and self-driving cars. But what they don't talk about is all of the white-collar work that AI is going to do.
I'm not a math major, but I understand this equation. So ChatGPT has been public facing for 29 months. And 2 recent studies, one from Harvard, one from Stanford, estimate that 25% of all human writing you encounter has been touched by AI, and currently 25% of all coding is being done by AI. 29 months to 25%. That is not going to go down. It is only going to go up. So, what are we going to do? What does it mean to be educated in an era of AI? This is why I think we need to raise the bar on cognitive engagement and the ability to learn and relearn.
What's going to happen when we have even more technology? And when the new technology displaces even more people? There are these narratives out there. If I get a little bit more education, I'm going to do better. And that's been the mantra for people all the way along. If you just get a little bit more education, there's a lot of people that have master's degrees that are now working in fulfillment centers and working in part-time jobs.
Future-proofing is really what education was always supposed to be, right? It was supposed to provide you with the ability to be flexible, in essence, being employable.
The #1 reason consistently for enrolling in post-secondary education is to get a good job. But when you actually talk to college graduates, they are consistently telling us that they don't actually feel prepared for the labor market.
This is a challenging topic in front of a group of doctoral students, but we're going to need to really think about what our goals for learning are, how we engage our students, and how we give them feedback on their progress in an era that has access to these tools. We've always known this progression exists, from novice, apprentice, journeyman, master, as you climb up the mastery scale of any skill set. And it always has taken time and effort to go up this ladder. And this journey applies to both vocational and academic pursuits. We usually think about being a mason, a plumber, or a carpenter, but it's just as apt for a writer, a designer, or an engineer. The difference today is our access to expertise is now unlimited through AI. So this cycle of having a goal to learn, having a plan to learn it, implementing, reflecting on how you're doing, getting that feedback and improving your performance has always been part of the self-directed learning cycle. But in an era of AI, you can now go up that scale with access to expertise at any time in almost any venue. All it takes is the desire to do it. If you want to learn something, you just need the desire, and you will have access to the tools that allow you to do it. Whatever you want to learn, there is a way to do it independently, and you're going to have to do it independently. Because if you get displaced from a job, if your career changes, if AI interrupts your career path, which it could and may do. How are you going to protect yourself against this displacement? In an era of AI, you can do anything you want as long as you have the desire to do it. You want to get more fit? Use athletic. It will give you workouts, help you meet your goal. Get better at writing. HyperWrite as a coach. These are not apps that do the writing for you. These are apps that take your writing and give you feedback on it. Same thing for math, ThetaWise. If this is making you uneasy, go to Ollie and get yourself a mental health coach. So it really doesn't matter what you want to improve. There's a way to do it. And how do we systemically help educators prepare kids for this world? And the answer is with systems. As educational leaders, we have to provide our peers with a pathway to learn these tools, to learn how to use them to teach kids, and to learn how to use them to improve what we're doing on a daily basis with our kids. Structures and frameworks like this one from Leon Furs on working with school leaders on what is the level of AI use in your building? What's acceptable? What kind of assignment is this? Can I use AI to do all of this, part of this, some of this? Being clear about what your expectations are about how AI is used and where it's okay to use it and how it's okay to use it are critical. Because if you ignore it, I guarantee your kids are using it. In my own organization, we've set up an AI strategies team. I have a director of AI strategy. We systemically work in each department every month on how we are using it within the structure of our organization. I have a multi-tiered training platform. Everybody gets some get more, and a few get really deep in the weeds because different applications require different levels of expertise, training, and support. We also use a really quick framework called the 3 C's, meaning we need to understand this, we need to have the capacity to use it, and we need to be curious about how we go about applying this to transform our work in service of our districts and our communities. We have a continuum for all three, and we use this with districts and with organizations to help them think through their own AI planning structure so that they have a way to think about where they are versus where they want to be and how to come up with a framework to help them proceed through it. We have our own AI and education podcast called Chat EDU. We're up to about episode 52. My director of AI strategy and my director of research and innovation team up every week. It's available on any podcast app, and it's really dedicated to try to synthesize the week's news in AI and put it in the context of K-12 education. I just can't say it enough. This is an earthquake, and we need to plan for it systemically and embrace it. I don't know what all the answers are, but I know the question of what will it mean to be educated in an era of AI is the first and most important question. And there's no wrong answer. The only thing you can do wrong is not ask it, because this is going to change everything over time. And we need to prepare the next generation to be ready for what this is going to do to them and to their family and to everything else that they're doing in their lives. It's an amazing time to be an educator. Couple minutes over, sorry for that, but there you go.
No, well worth it. A lot of information and just eye-opening, a lot to think about. And you'll hear this throughout the afternoon, I'm sure. So thank you, Dr. Costa, and we hope you'll join us and stay on for our Q&A. At this time, we will move into our panel session. We Dr. Jennifer Harrington Wilson will moderate the panel. And following that panel, again, we will have an opportunity for question and answers of our keynote and panelists. Dr. Wilson is the coordinator of educational technology for Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES and is actively engaged in the conversation around artificial intelligence in education. She has experience as an elementary teacher, principal, Director of Technology, Chief Information Officer, and Director of Pupil Personnel Services. And she also brings a well-rounded perspective to the integration of AI in schools. She's a strong advocate for assistive technology and data-informed decision-making. Dr. Harrison Wilson, she's passionate about exploring how these emerging technologies can enhance teaching, learning, and accessibility. And she embraces every experience as an opportunity for growth and innovation in education. So Jennifer, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Tasha. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and thank you, Jonathan, for a very thoughtful keynote to start us off. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Caitlin Sassone. Dr. Sassone is the Director of Technology and Chief Information Officer for the Rise City School District. A lifelong learner and dedicated educator, she is certified in elementary and special education and holds 2 master's degrees, one in educational technology and the other in administration. In 2021, she earned her doctorate in educational leadership from Manhattanville University. Dr. Sassone is passionate about the transformational potential of artificial intelligence in education. She is leading innovative efforts in RIE to integrate AI into the classroom, exploring new ways to enhance teaching and learning through technology. Committed to continuous growth and innovation, she actively researches and implements AI-driven tools that empower educators and students, fostering engagement, creativity, and personalized learning experiences. Caitlin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be here. I know we have 10 minutes, so I'm just going to briefly talk, piggybacking off of what Jonathan had led us to, and really thinking about how do we prepare the next generation of students for AI. And so giving you a little bit of background of what we're doing here. We're not the experts, but we're really starting to think about how do we continue to push education, our learners, ourselves, as the whole organization within Rise City. So starting from a little bit of all the different things that we're trying out this year, we're really thinking about strategically what does classroom learning look like and how do we foster it so that students are incorporating this new technology into their thinking, into their learning, not stifling creativity and critical thinking, but using it as a thought partner and a support as another resources that we would provide for students. Knowing that this work can't be done in a silo. A lot of this work started this year out of our technology committee. That was one of our biggest initiatives, was saying we need a lot of different stakeholders to support us in this thinking, in this brainstorming of strategically how do we roll this plan out to the larger community. So one of our first initiatives on the committee was creating guidelines. And so while this is not a Board of Education policy, these guidelines were just the first start of thinking about how do we want teachers to implement and integrate AI successfully in a purposeful, meaningful way, and then what is our expectations for students. We know it's very difficult when we tell students no, they can't use something because they're excited too. So versus no, the different conversation is how can you, and what does that look like as a learner in today's society. And so creating these guidelines, which I'm happy to share with the group. I know we have limited time today, but we're all learning and growing together in all of our schools. So I'm happy to share that work. But it's an iterative process. And that is something that we've really started to talk with our faculty about. These are the first drafts of guidelines. This is the first, real discussion we're having on what could it look like in a classroom? What tools are we allowed to use? Thinking in mind that we're still following Ed Law 2D, we're being data mindful and compliant. And we're not throwing the 500 tools or a million of tools that are out there for students and teachers. We're picking the ones that make the most sense to us. So really narrowing down what teachers have access to, what students have access to, and putting a plan in place. Once we've designed these guidelines at our technology committee, we rolled it out to the larger staff, getting feedback multiple times, bringing it to the Board of Education, bringing it to our community members, having parent universities, because not only does AI happen in school, we need to educate our families of what it looks like at home and how they can be support partners with their children and educating them of how they should be using it. In addition to that, not only as guidelines, can we just say we have guidelines and expect that everyone's going to use that? We're now really thinking about systemically and throughout a strategic plan, what that looks like from the curricular end from K-12. And so for us, as everyone knows, scheduling is tight. Minutes, there's just not enough in the day. So where do we fit this in? Where do we ask classroom teachers to roll this now into their curriculum when they have a packed schedule, so on and so forth? So we've really been thinking hard with a lot of stakeholders. At our elementary level, we're starting these conversations in our library media classes because all of our elementary students take library media. And so for us, for right now, that's the first kind of landing spot. And we're using the state scope and sequence for a library to help build those lessons that will be carried out starting next year. And again, while AI, we don't have our kindergartners using AI, starting having the conversation around the language and the vocabulary. So the time they get into 3rd+ grades, they've heard it and they're exposed to it. In our middle school classes, we're working with some of our elective teachers on some core classes. All of our students have an opportunity to take a passion projects course in 6th grade, which encompasses a lot of research and design and writing, almost like a mini dissertation in 6th grade, but they get exposed to the whole research process. And so that is now a way where we've done in the past a lot of lessons around digital literacy, which will continue, but now we're incorporating AI. How can AI be used to help support your research and your writing in this course? And we're building it up into 7th and 8th grade, and then also in our high school classes. So we're really trying to think systemically where it fits for kids and what do they need, because we know all of our students are using it. The biggest question we've gotten from some of our students, especially in high school, is they're not really sure how to engage with an AI, right? So how do they make critical prompts? Could they use it as a feedback partner? How do they keep pushing their thinking versus just writing something and regurgitating the information that it's given? So they're asking us for some real guidelines and supports on how to push their thinking with that. We're also continuing our professional learning with all of our teachers. We're running an AI Institute this summer, and we've done AI all year to just really make sure everyone has a handle on the tools that we are promoting and the benefits and supports that it could offer for instruction. So we've used it a lot for differentiation, for small group work, for analyzing data reports. We're really trying to embrace it just with all of those good practices in mind that we would do on a normal basis. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, or anyone wants any minutes, please let me know. But it was nice to speak with everyone.
Thank you very much, Caitlin, for sharing the thoughtful process your school district is using to incorporate AI into your programs. I believe it's a great example of how schools can approach AI with both curiosity and caution, aligning innovation with your values and goals. I mean, I know that unfortunately Caitlin has to leave us because she unexpectedly has to do another presentation. So if you do have any questions for her, if you could put them in the chat, maybe we can come back to her if she's still here as when we're done with our next speaker. So our next speaker, I'm proud to introduce Dr. Ellen McDonald. Dr. McDonald, sorry, Ellen, serves as the Executive Director of the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center, fondly known as the LYRIC, in Harrison, New York. As part of the Boards of Cooperative Education Services of New York State, the LYRIC's mission is to provide K-12 leadership with our partner districts and BOCES to achieve their educational technology goals. Dr. McDonald brings her 3 decades of experience as a teacher, building principal, and school district administrator to her current role. Ellen, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. We'll see if the slide deck is friendly or not. We'll see where it goes. I'm gonna look at some faces and make sure you're seeing the slide deck, and then we're gonna do it. All right. So, given that the topic was leadership in the age of Gen AI, we'll go there. As Dr. Harrington Wilson just shared, I am Ellen McDonald, and as she also stated, our mission, right, at the LYRIC is to provide K-12 leadership and every word in here is purposeful, with our partner districts and BOCES to achieve their educational technology goals. It's not a jazzy statement, but it is what we do and how we guide our work. So I'd love to use my 10 minutes to share 3 key aspects of our ongoing story about the use of Gen AI tools at the LYRIC and in districts in our region. I earned my doctorate 10 years ago as part of cohort 4 of the signature pathway at what was then called Manhattanville College. Love saying Manhattanville University now. So my dissertation was certainly not focused on Gen AI. However, my action research and experience in the field, I hope it's helpful to you as we navigate these Gen AI waters. And The bulk of my time is going to be spent on the first, the how and the why. We actually used an early adopter cohort model. It's about being a leader and working with adults. And as an example, we'll show an example of something that came out of that work. At the end, I'll share a quick visit that I had with some third grade students and a short trip down privacy lane, and then I'll close. So this is our story. It started in July of 2023. At that time, I attended a Gartner client webinar on Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365. Yes, the word Microsoft was twice in the title. I took my notes. I really didn't know what I was hearing, but by December, our districts were interested in getting licenses and asked for a demo. So between December and February, we decided that we wanted to launch an early adopter cohort to see how Copilot, which was our choice of Gen AI, would work in our tenant and would help us as an organization. We figured at that point, because that was mid-year, that we could afford about 60 licenses, which is about a quarter of our staff. So on February 21st, we brought Microsoft in as an endnote for our professional learning exchange to help people see what was possible with that tool. So why Copilot or a generative AI tool? This slide shows part of our why. We wanted to see if it could free up our employees to focus on those uniquely human aspects of their work. And you'll hear me say that phrase a few times. I think it dovetails nicely with what some of Jonathan was saying. We hoped that this tool or any tool would give our staff breathing room to get some of those tactical tasks done and allow more time for creativity. I'm sure you can see like the direct parallel to students, right? What could our children do if they could focus more on their uniquely human abilities and not just rote learning, as Jonathan was talking about? So we went with an early adopter model, and here's a quote about the theory from a person by the name of Marcus Vendelkirchen. He said, as the theory goes, a tiny 2.5% sliver of the population are innovators, or the very first to test a new product, end quote. And you know you have a few of those people in your shop who are always trying things out before you greenlight them. That's easy. We're creative people, and we like to try things. Anyway, so back to the quote. He then said, then come the early adopters, whose buy-in is seen as a bellwether of widespread adoption. They account for only 13.5% of the population, but hold an outsized influence, end quote. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for people whose buy-in would lead to widespread adoption if that was indeed the correct course of action for our organization. So we began to build. And as much as I recommend being trained by those who actually, built a tool, I'm also a proponent of getting some different points of view. So this early adopter cohort was invited to watch the 2024 version of that Gartner presentation that I attended in 2023 about the perils and promises of Copilot. And it gave us a good grounding in what to look out for as we implemented this tool. Not all sunshine and roses, right? So we planned some more, and we released Copilot for Microsoft 365 on May 1st of 2024 to 58 brave souls in our organization. So I highly recommend you don't just turn a generative AI tool on and forget it. We didn't send our staff out empty-handed. These are some of the resources we provided in our very opening email before we turned it on. I'm happy to make this deck available, right, to all of you, so you have the links. For us, it was important to be able to visualize what could be. And since we chose a Microsoft tool, they had different scenario decks for different positions, and there was one about information technology that worked best for us. And we especially liked their use cases, and they had day-in-the-life scenarios to help people see, oh, I can see how that could fit into my work. They have a good blog with some resources. They have a good YouTube Copilot library. I encourage you to just look around and develop a set of resources for your teams of teachers so they're set up for success, right? So in May of 2024, we launched it. We had our first module trainings directly with Microsoft to learn more specifically about the tool, and we continued our internal professional learning. We also built something in Teams called the Copilot Center of Excellence. And what might that be, you may ask? Well, here it is. And regardless of which generative AI tool or tools you allow in your district, I highly encourage you to develop a learning space where people can share ideas. We happen to use Microsoft Teams. We have 5 channels on this team. They're listed on the left side. I'll just briefly tell you what they are. The general channel doesn't change much because it's designed to be the landing page for whoever joins the Copilot adoption stream over time. It just says, this is what this resource is for, and this is what all the other channels are about. Like announcements, that's what it is, announcements, right? Community calls, actually, let me stay on that slide. Hold on a second, and should not touch the touchpad when I'm in the middle of talking. Community calls where we set up Teams meetings. So we actually had virtual meetings. We recorded them, and the beautiful power of that was in the files, because it creates a recording folder where all the transcripts and recordings of meetings of this cohort were, which we could then interrogate with Copilot to, if we missed it or if we wanted to remember something that happened. Pretty much every tool that we now do virtual meetings with can do something like that. The two we expected would get the most play were the community chat and the power prompts. Community chat is where we would pose our wonderings. Hey, I'm trying this. This is what it said to me. What, anybody else having this problem? And it was that dialoguing kind of space. And power prompts, we share good prompts with each other. Hey, I was trying to do this. Here's some language I used. I got a good response. And we found that that particular channel has completely fallen off in usage, as people are just getting more proficient in their prompting and they don't need much more help. They're good to go. So I encourage you, as people's needs change, we need to respond to that and change what we're offering in terms of support to our teachers and our staff accordingly. So I want to give you an example, and here's one story from us and our early adopter experience. So Leslie Accardo is our coordinator of model schools, and here's an example of how she used generative AI to help her. She was designing a learning session for teachers. So imagine yourself as a leader. You've got either a faculty meeting coming up, or you're working on a superintendent's conference day, and you want to do an hour on something. She wanted to design a PD session reviewing the 5 main areas of the computer science and digital fluency standards and discuss strategies for learning in that. So you have these 3 requests. How does she remix them to make it easily digestible? Give me some examples of these standards in action, using the software the district already has, and how do we then build this into just a single 90-minute session? So she went down this road. First, she asked Copilot to simplify the 5 concepts into 3 broad themes. Boom, done. She wanted details for each. Done. Then examples of activities. Boom. And ways to assess these standards in the classroom. Boom. All done in a matter of a few minutes, not hours. She then asked it for examples using the software titles that this particular district that she was going to work with actually subscribed to. Now, some of these ideas were good and some were terrible, but it gave her time back to do what I call that uniquely human work that she is so good at doing. As we know, finding time for the CSDF standards in the elementary school day is a challenge. So she asked it to give her specific examples of where throughout the day, and I know you can't read the words here, but again, you can have the deck, but a teacher could embed these standards into the work with first grade students. And Copilot even gave the student a name, Alex. If you want ways to incorporate it in grades 2 through 5, no problem. She just asked for it, and here invented Sam, Olivia, Ethan, and Mia. And they all now have plans as well. To round out the Gen AI assistance she asked for that agenda for a 60-minute presentation based on all of that prior ask. Done. And ultimately, she asked it to create a slide deck that she could use. She was so impressed by the support, she just couldn't stop talking about it for weeks. It allowed her creative juices to get flowing based on what Gen AI gave her, and she was continuing to do what I've been talking about, the uniquely human aspects of the work. I got to finish up. So just 2 quick examples. I had a wonderful visit in Pocantico Hills last week. I was able to have lunch with 3 third graders. Alana Winnick, their director of technology, set up the visit for me. And those kids are talking about being, the language they use there is being a detective and a DJ. They need to investigate what they learn through AI, determine if it's accurate, and then they need to remix any language that they get so that the writing is truly their own. These kids were clear that what they get from an AI tool is not the final product. One student talked to me about using a Gen AI tool to get an image of a specific frog she was studying. She knew enough about the frog to know the image was not correct, so she didn't use it. I would have talked to her about not using Gen AI for images of things that actually already exist, because you could just Google that. But she's in 3rd grade. she'll get there. But the main point, these students were clear. Gen AI is just one tool in their toolbox, and they still have uniquely human work to do. Just want to take these last 30 seconds to just point out, to think about privacy in Gen AI meetings, right? The notes. As an organization that has partially adopted Copilot, not all of our employees have the tools, and not everyone is comfortable knowing that every word they're saying is being transcribed and being recorded. So we encourage you to think about a district-wide communication, coming up with practices specifically about meetings and recordings, because there may be times when you don't want to turn on that recording, so people will have a differently candid conversation with you, whether they're being recorded or not. So it's just something I wanted to put as a teaser at the end to think about. So this is my contact information. I went over. I apologize. I will stop talking.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for sharing all that you did, including the approach to implementing Copilot. I think I would call that thoughtful experimentation, starting small, focusing on providing resources and listening for feedback. What a great way to keep people at the center of the process. Okay, and next, and finally, last but not least, is Dr. Claire Comerford. Dr. Claire Comerford is currently the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning in the Pelham Union Free School District in Westchester County, New York. She has over 21 years of experience in education. She has held various roles, including classroom teacher, dean, director of humanities, and director of learning at schools in New York City, Rhinebeck, and Somers. Committed to ensuring opportunities for every learner, Dr. Comerford has led curriculum, instruction, and professional learning initiatives with a strong focus on access and systems alignment. She's presented locally and regionally on topics such as generative artificial intelligence in education and topics in social studies. Just earlier today, Dr. Comerford successfully defended her dissertation entitled Understanding Secondary Humanities Teachers' Use and Views of Generative Artificial Intelligence in Instruction, a Grounded Theory Study. So it's my pleasure to turn this over to Dr. Comerford.
Well, thank you so much. That was really diving in the deep end, being called doctor that many times in that short period of time. And, with respect to Manhattanville University and Dr. Iverson, we all know that we're doing that to be kind, but I don't think the title is conferred until May 15th. But thank you so much. I do appreciate it, and I will get started because I know my time is short. So first of all, kudos to the organizers of this Hot Topics Forum, because Jonathan, Caitlin, Ellen, and my presentations really gel very well together. So good job on that to Putnam Northern Westchester, both these organizers, and also Manhattanville University. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and see if I can pull off presenting. But probably not. I'm always pretty bad at this. Let's see how we can do this. Sorry.
So if you participate in this next year at this time, we're sure that AI will share your screen for you.
That would be great, because I always struggle with it. Okay. So I just need to move this so I can present. Start slideshow, maybe play from the beginning. Can everyone see that? Okay, great.
You're looking good.
So thank you so much. Very, very briefly, I did not intend on start doing a technology-based dissertation when I started the program in Manhattanville, but when OpenAI dropped ChatGPT free of charge in November 2022, I couldn't stop thinking about the impact this was going to have on education. And as I continued to, started to research that, I recognized that this is going to be one of those very pivotal moments in education that we will all look back one day and say before and after. And I wanted to capture what was happening at the beginning of this relationship, even though artificial intelligence and education have been intertwined since the 1960s, and artificial intelligence has been around since Alan Turing posed the question, can computers think, in 1950. This new evolution of generative artificial intelligence is changing the way we all live, work, and learn. And so definitely wanted to capture and pay attention to the beginnings of that new relationship in what, I'll call the age of AI in education. So this study, the purpose of my study that I did, defend this morning, examined the integration of generative artificial intelligence in secondary humanities classrooms in New York State, focusing on teachers' instructional practices, the perceptions of student learning, the impact of student learning, and the views on potential future integration of generative artificial intelligence in education. My findings of this qualitative grounded theory study revolve around three major themes that emerged from the data. The first was the teacher typology. There was a very distinct duality of teacher typology of my participants, even though I had a criteria survey that, I intentionally sought to have participants who self-identified as having taught for more than 3 years. So I wanted experienced teachers who are using generative artificial intelligence in their instructional practices, at least on a biweekly basis, and who are from New York State and in public education. And so there was a little bit of a narrowing there, trying to get at the innovators, yes, maybe, but really knowing I was going to be looking at the early adopters if we're, following Roger's theory of the diffusion of innovation. So I interviewed 15 participants who met the criteria, and I found this duality of typology for them, which I'll explain in a moment. Also, this continuing paradox that most literature with artificial intelligence and education is wrought with is this paradox of promise and peril. Much excitement about the possibilities, but also much concern about the impact, the negative impact it might have on authentic learning and student engagement. And then finally, very much in line with my peers here on this panel, is this idea of need for support, the emphasis on the need for support that became very, very, very clear throughout the study. So the teacher typologies right now in education and secondary classrooms of English and social studies chosen because there were gaps in literature there in that research at the time I started. Instructional innovators, the first typology, these teachers see generative artificial intelligence as a powerful catalyst for critical thinking, creativity, meaningful engagement. They view generative artificial intelligence as a tool that can be leveraged to enrich and enhance student learning. They're prioritizing enriching learning experiences and ensuring ethical and transparent use of GAI in their classrooms, and they view and use it as a tool to increase student engagement, critical thinking, and student agency. These participants spoke of and use language of process over product, utilizing it to critically think, asking students to critique the outputs of the chatbots themselves, and kind of deepen in their learning skills, and helping students to learn that this is just another tool that they will use not to replace their thinking, but to enhance it. The other typology that existed out of the 15, these were 6 of the participants. They view it as a potential obstacle to authentic learning. It requires constant vigilance and reactive measures to ensure students engage with material meaningfully rather than passively outsourcing their thinking. They prioritize concerns over cheating, academic integrity, and the potential for students to over-rely on generative artificial intelligence for content creation. And they spend a lot of time in utilizing the tool to mitigate GAI-related cheating, and they perceive that many students use it as a default. However, they also recognize the inevitability that AI is here and it's not going away, and they have to start engaging with it. Paradox and peril, the paradox of promise and peril emerged also. This duality in thinking of the attitude, of the participants thinking about generative artificial intelligence. They revealed genuine enthusiasm for the transformative potential to enhance learning, bridge learning gaps, but simultaneously harbor significant concerns about its possible negative impact on authentic learning. And this encapsulates both the opportunities and challenges of adopting transformative technologies in education. In connection with this paradox, one of my final questions was asking participants to complete the sentence, I used to think and now I think. And across the board, whether the typology of the participant, I kind of deemed an instructional innovator, an efficiency pragmatist, across the board, there were very hopeful reports, and it showed this evolution of thought. I used to think that that this was going to be the end of reading and writing, but now I see it as a tool that can augment these skills in students. I used to think that this was going to be a major problem, but now I see it can be used positively. I used to think that I was afraid of this, but now I'm hopeful. And then one of the quotes was, I used to think this was going to be a major problem for learning and education, but now I see it is the solution, not a solution, but the solution. So this evolution of thought was prevalent among among the two different typologies that I identified in my data for my study. So some interesting things there. And then finally, along lines with everyone has spoken about, and what some of the great, the tech leaders we're hearing from are doing so well in many districts, but it's not happening across the board, is this need for support and the need for institutional support, guidance on implementation. It's a critical concern among educators. The early adopters expressed the reason why they started integrating generative artificial intelligence into their instruction was because of guidance, support, communication, learning that was received from the leadership of their home districts, and then discuss the tensions that exist when that isn't present between their colleagues, among the students, people not knowing if they can talk about it, students not knowing which class they can and which class they can't use it in. So recognizing that this is an important thing to make sure that we're talking about, we're demystifying generative artificial intelligence for students. If we don't, they see it as a secret cheating tool that only they know about if their adults around them aren't speaking about it. And so we need to kind of really bring it to the forefront and learn alongside them to show that this is something we're all going to be using, and let's do it together. Let's figure out how to use it well, right, ethically, responsibly, and help us to think better, not less. I just developed the dual pathways framework. This is the framework, the conceptual framework that came out of my study that kind of represents the teacher typologies and also the support ecosystem in which the typologies interact and learn and grow, which consists of the leadership, learning, and guidance that was called for, and also that tension management between that paradox between promise and peril. Much need for continued research on this, I recommended, but I'll just kind of end with echoing Jonathan's, how this panel began, this idea that, almost 2 decades have passed since, the Partnership for 21st Century Learning began to identify and advocate for that we need to be preparing students in a digital age that we can't even predict what that looks like because of how fast technology is advancing. Yet we're still many of our schools are still operating in an outdated industrial era model of education and instructional design that fails to systematically integrate the technologies that are reshaping our society. And as I feel my study demonstrates, if leaders in educational institutions do not start to embrace generative artificial intelligence as a catalyst for meaningful instruction and transform the way we teach, the education as we know it runs the risk of becoming obsolete.
Thank you very much, Claire. And just so you know, I did get permission to call you doctor before I did it.
Oh, good.
We voted before you entered the room, so just to be sure. But honestly, your research gives me some hope that teachers have this growing belief that with thoughtful use, AI can help shape a smarter, more connected and creative future. So thank you very much for sharing that. So with that, I would like to open up our group of presenters today to answer any questions that you might have. I don't know if you want to, we're a small enough group that you could unmute yourself and ask the question, or you could put it in the chat. So if nobody has any questions, or to give you a little bit of time to think, since this is an event co-sponsored by Manhattanville University, the first question that comes to mind for me is, what areas of AI in education do you think doctoral students can contribute meaningfully to in their research as we move forward with more individuals being part of the doctoral program. So I'll throw that out to any one of our three panelists or to Jonathan.
I have a question that I love research on, and we constantly struggle and discuss the line about how much do you need to know in any given field prior to leveraging AI tools for advancement. So the example I use for myself is if I went to a high school language arts department and asked them, what do I need to know to be a professional writer? I would probably get a list of most of the Common Core writing standards because that's what they believe I need to know. And before I respond, I've written a book, I've written 100 professional articles, and I couldn't diagram a sentence if you threaten my life, but I know what the language should sound like, and I know it's important to follow the conventions. So I use tools in my disposal to make sure that the things I write do those things, even though I don't know how to do them myself. And when I use that as an example, I get pushback. I'm like, well, you learned the old-fashioned way. Yeah, I did, but I don't remember any of it. So how much does a person need to know as a coder, as a writer, as a graphic designer to get the feel for it and then use these tools to accelerate themselves? There's probably not a right answer, but there's probably a band, right? That's the right answer. And I know it's not what we say it is in the Common Core, because I don't know a single adult who knows everything in all 12 of those areas that they're supposed to know. So one of the biggest challenges I see is how do we reframe curriculum so it has a reasonable amount of things that kids have the time they need to explore them in a thoughtful and authentic way, because durable work takes longer than crappy work. And what would a reimagined curriculum look like in an era of AI that is framed that way? Because I really think until we grapple with that as a professional body, we are going to be stuck in that industrial era that you mentioned in your dissertation, and we are never going to free ourselves of what we have traditionally done in order to prepare these kids for this new generation of tools. So that's the question that keeps me up at night, and anyone that can help me answer it, I would really be happy to talk to you.
Ellen or Claire, any thoughts?
Yeah, as I'm thinking about, focusing on what should we be trying to have the current doctoral students look into, right? What needs the research? I was thinking very similarly along the lines, Jonathan, of what you were saying is what's worth knowing, and therefore that's what we're teaching, right? And very early on, as people started to try to imagine what does this do, I said we're not going to see a change as dramatic as I think we need to see in education until those standards are completely thrown out, messed with, and changed, right? Because especially at the secondary level, when I was a high school math teacher, the standards say I have to teach this, so that's what we're doing, right? And until we can get all of our state education departments and national organizations to say, we got to rethink this whole thing about what is it that students need to know and be able to do. And I think we got to flip that and say, what do they need to be able to do? And there's a little bit of no, right? That the standards have been so focused on content, right? That we need to flip that narrative on its head and really think about, and then how do we get every child, right, to a concept of these higher level thinking, and because that's what we should be doing. And I think about it sort of in a parallel. You mentioned coding, Jonathan, and I'll stop talking. My husband works in software, and he has never been the coder. He's always been the quality assurance guy. Right? So he runs a testing group everywhere he's ever worked. And maybe that's where we're going, right, in education. We need to get good quality assurance. They need to know how to do that, right? So I've got all the stuff that the tools gave me. I need to use what I, call the uniquely human part to say, but is any of it worth it? How do I differentiate with good and bad and all that higher order synthesis stuff, and how do we get kids who, all right, boom, all this stuff is in front of you. We need to think about being good quality assurance analysts, and how do we change our standards to match that?
Someone put in the chat the Alpha School link. I haven't seen it, but I'm going to look. The best I've seen to date is from Avenues in New York. It's a private school, K-12. I was on the accreditation team for Avenues, and their elements framework is freaking brilliant. It's the periodic table metaphor. You click on a skill or a knowledge base, and it pulls up what you should know 3, 6 in 3rd grade, 6th grade, 8th grade. You get the idea. But it's the most concise, thoughtful distillation of a set of skills and knowledge that I have seen, and I've always admired it, and think that that is a path, that's a vision of a pathway that's, you can see it all. It fits together. It's a brilliant combination of skills and knowledge. And I think something like that, that's accessible, understandable, with evidences, and it's the best I've seen, and I'd love to recreate it in an actual school. Part of our feedback to them is, you've created something masterful, and yet there's a gap between what happens every day in your school and what you've said you want these kids to know and be able to do. And you got to tighten them together, because you've built something of great beauty and insight. So that, my mind goes there a lot. I really like that model.
So Jonathan, is that the Avenues the World School? Is that the one?
Yes, it is. Yeah, they have a campus in Sao Paulo, in Palo Alto, in New York. They recently sold some of their assets to a different company, so it's not the originators, but the new company has said they want to stay with it. So if you look for Avenues World Elements, you'll see it, and it's been at the top of my mind since I encountered it a couple years ago.
Jonathan, is Avenues an IB school, or am I being mistaken, or are you not sure?
No, they have a strong IB influence. They do have an IB track for their middle high, but like another, now let's be clear, this is a K-12 school. Tuition starts in kindergarten, high 70s. So, I mean, they get like $130 million in tuition every year. So this is a very well resourced school.
Well, I'd probably offer to rent, but
yeah, every kid gets through 3rd grade bilingual. So K3 is a bilingual immersion, and then they emerge from that to do the rest of what they're doing. So there it is. It's really quite wonderful. But yeah, it's amazing. It's a very rare combination of wonderful resources and just high level strategic educational thinking.
I'm going to move us to this. Okay.
I just want to, do you mind if I just jump in there really quickly? I think that there is some hope, right? New York State is trying the next gen learning standards. They are trying to integrate the inquiry-based instruction. They're trying to move away from the rote memorization of content and engage students in meaningful action-based experiments that we know best practices say is what creates that foundational knowledge that is necessary to implement and use the skills that we're hoping we're developing at the same time. And the whole standards transition through New York State, that the one of the major challenges I see is transitioning teachers away from that old model of covering the content, making sure we hit this and hit that, instead of creating these, allowing the learner to kind of lead through the learning the content through experiences and inquiry. But sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to, so we had 2 questions in the chat that are kind of related. So Dr. Letitia Payne put in a comment, and I wonder, Letitia, if you're willing to share that, because that dovetails nicely into a question that was asked of Dr. Comerford in terms of when she interviewed the principals and their use of AI, and were they encouraging, what did they see where the blocks were? So I think if you would ask your question, we could get the answer to both those questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for your presentations. They were very, very well presented. So, we still have both students and teachers fearful of using AI or even admitting usage of AI if they are using it for fear of the word cheating. They feel like they're cheating. Students don't know if how they're using it is cheating. So, we know across the board, some districts are putting guidelines in place, some districts are not. So the question kind of is like, what are some ways that leaders can continue to provide guidance for educators and for students? We are an IB World School within my school district, and IB does have some guidelines, but it's still very I would say it's not something that people the students and the teachers are still feeling uncomfortable, in a way, with the usage of AI.
I'm tempted to quote one of my participants who said, if you don't want students to misuse generative artificial intelligence, have them use it. Right. So I think we were poised. Now we're moving away from this very kind of special moment in education where the adults could learn alongside the students. And so I think my initial answer to you, Dr. Payne, would be that we need to talk about it. We need to model. We need to be transparent when we're engaging with generative artificial intelligence to take away the stigma and to demonstrate that, yes, we use it for this, we don't use it for this, and to be very, very vocal about how and how we're using it and how we wouldn't use it also, and kind of just being very transparently modeling that use so that it becomes not, the secret that people aren't talking about, but rather, something we're all engaging with, we understand that we're all engaging with, and we're going to learn how to use it correctly together.
I put the link in the chat for the Leon Furs, the AIAS, the Artificial Intelligent Assessment Scale. It's one of several scales like this that we work with and have seen that just gets a dialogue started about what is an appropriate use in this context. So for example, we see teachers who use this scale who say, okay, this is an AI-free zone activity. I need you to do this on your own, no phones, no laptops, no nothing. Or this is an AI partner activity. You are welcome to ask it. You are welcome to work with it, but I'm going to talk to you one-on-one at the end of it to make sure you understand it. Because everyone gets the fact AI zone, no AI, that's good. It was all you. You did it with AI and said it was you. We all know that's bad. Everything in the middle is up for debate, right? It's up to context. It's up to what the assignment is. It's what the goal is. And if teachers are teaching without knowledge of this, their kids are making their own choices about where they are based on their own moral compass, and that's it. And we always have fun talking to teachers about, wow, you just use this to save 3 hours. Okay for thee, but not for me. So how do you reconcile that? How do you talk about it? And some kind of framework that you can refer to and work through so everyone's on at least the same page of what it looks like, I think is really helpful for that kind of discussion.
Alan?
Yeah, I was going to add that one of the things that I've had some success in talking with leaders and teachers about when we get into the very real conversation of, but it's cheating, right? Getting at that piece. I encourage teachers, I said, well, yeah, if you're asking them the same question you asked them last year before they had access to this tool, right? That's on you as the educator to figure out what are the tasks we are now asking students to do. Because if the entire task can be done well by taking your prompt and shoving it in a tool and spitting it back to you, you have not done the work that you now need to do. And yes, I'm sorry that you're in year 24 of your career and you really thought you could coast on those lesson plans that you've had for 2 decades. Sweetheart, it has changed. right? And so we have to change the tasks that we are giving, or it's absolutely going to be a big old cheat.
And to follow up on that, we have used a construct for about 2 years. Vulnerable and durable is what you're teaching, how you're teaching it, and how you're assessing it vulnerable to being undermined by AI, or is it durable in the face of AI? And if the answer is it's vulnerable, then we're going to teach you AI tools that can help convert those things into durable tasks, right? The great irony is the same intelligence that's undermining your crappy lessons could be used by you to make them less crappy if you just believe that's what you should do. But like I said before, they all take longer. So if you had 180 days and 180 lessons, if you're doing it right, you probably will use 75 of those lessons converted to durable activities in your new year. So that's why that question, what do we really need to know versus be able to do, is so critical because they're in a box. In order to do this well, you need more time. You don't have it if you're going to go from Plymouth Rock to yesterday in U.S. history in 184 days. So that is the box we're in, and we need to figure out a way to help people get out of it.
Thank you for that. So I shared in the chat, Suffern Central School District did some very good work around guidelines for AI. And one of the things that they have on their website that I find very interesting is a procedure for addressing a suspected misuse of AI. Because I think one of the important things for our leaders to have is tools to use when an issue arises. So not only the scale, the assessment scale, but what do you do next? So I added that. So any other comments or any other questions? I can ask another question. So I'll ask a very generic question to end us. We only have a couple minutes left. So if you could pick one thing that you think AI is going to do to reshape the role of teachers in the next 2 years, what do you think that one thing AI will do in reshaping the role of teachers?
I hope it does what we've all been kind of talking about and serves as this real leverage point that you know, many people already are moving in the right direction, but kind of getting more people over that line. So we're not talking, as Ellen just did, about someone who's teaching the same lesson for 20 years without thinking deeply about what's changed in those 20 years. And I also think in what I've heard and seen a lot is kind of this idea that the teacher can orchestrate all these meaningful learning experiences for students using generative artificial intelligence, and then can prompt in very meaningful ways in which the artificial intelligence can interact with students. And it kind of creates this educator multiplier that where the students are getting real-time feedback that a teacher of 24 students may not have the opportunity, time, or ability to provide that personalized, meaningful feedback on a regular basis. The teacher, of course, being very important as the person who's been putting the prompts and designing the instruction through the use of a generative artificial intelligence application, but the being able to have, you know, that on the ground immediate feedback that is guiding students along the way, I think could be extremely helpful.
Thank you.
We've been asking all our teacher candidate finalists to submit inspiration portfolios. So usually those first rounds interviews, they're talking about their background, their knowledge, etc. When we get down to who are we going to hire, we want teachers to tell us how they inspire kids to do things that the kids didn't think they could do before they met them, because that is going to be the premier value of a teacher in this age. Yes, foundational content knowledge is important, but in an era where knowledge is ubiquitous, it's the uniquely human characteristic that's going to make you a uniquely impactful instructor. So yes, all the foundational skills and knowledge has to be there. But what's going to separate someone I'm going to hire from someone who I'm not is their ability to show me they care about kids, they can connect with kids, and they can inspire them. Because without that, I can set you up with a chatbot who will be better than you. And I say that knowing how bad that sounds. But if you don't care about kids and you're not connecting with them, I have a chatbot who can do it. And they won't grieve, they won't take health insurance, they're not going to call in sick. So you need to think about what your gift is before this goes much further.
And Ellen, we're a minute over, but do you have one thing that you think will help reshape the role of teachers with AI?
It's similar to what Jonathan's saying, is that every time they think about what they're going to do with students, they need to think about what's the uniquely human part of this. What's the uniquely human part?
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll pass this back to Tasha.
Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Dr. Costa, and thank you, Jen, for moderating such a great and thought-provoking conversation. No matter how many times I sit in and listen to AI conversations, I'm always learning something new and just really astonished at what it is and what's to come. So before I turn it over to Dr. Susan Iverson for closing remarks, I just wanted to let you know that I will share an evaluation link in the chat. If you could just take 2 to 3 minutes to fill out that link and let us know what you want to see in the series we will be planning for next year. And it's important for us to hear from you about the topics that are important to you so that we can craft and develop these sessions around those topics. So I will put that link in the chat. And Dr. Iverson.
Great, thank you. All of these are wonderful. And this one is a space that colleagues know I think a lot about and wrestle with. So I love opportunities to think about it. I have the challenging task to try to weave together in 2 minutes a few takeaways from across the keynote and the panel. One theme throughout is that we can't, and Jonathan, I think you opened with this, we can't argue for authentic learning and believe that students aren't going to use any tools they have available, particularly technology tools, and AI is now one of those tools that's part of their learning process. And it raises then the question around the assumption that if education was supposed to be future-proof for one's career, what is the meaning of Gen AI now that it's not going to eclipse some of those skills and careers? And the human component is the one that I heard us come back to again and again and again. Jonathan laid out the 3 C's framework of conceptual understanding, capacity, and curiosity. And while I don't believe any of the panelists knew that in advance, they all sort of hit on that. Caitlin started with demonstrating how guidelines are really important, and then incorporating this into strategic planning, even specifically into curriculum, right down to the elementary grades. Ellen echoed this in emphasizing the importance of planning and preparation and developing capacity through professional learning, and really gave intriguing example of that co-pilot Center for Excellence and how initial chats and sharing power prompts almost adjourned itself because people were learning collectively about how to do this together. And I liked the phrase when she said, "Don't turn it on and forget about it." I'm thinking of the hose in the lawn, right? Then suddenly your well runs dry. So make sure that we keep in mind kind of what we've started, and a part of our planning is maintaining that. And Claire, your findings are remarkable, certainly laying out those typologies from instructional innovators to efficiency pragmatists. But I love the model that you've developed, emphasizing the importance of an ecosystem of support, which we see in the center, the co-pilot center that Ellen described. All in all, Claire asked us sort of what are these 21st century skills that were created so much long ago but technology is just barreling past us. And so how do we think about these so that we don't risk continuing to replicate an outdated industrial era model? And the educators need to be a guide through this process, or else everyone, I think Jonathan said, risks using their own moral compass, or maybe it was Ellen, and their confusion to guide decisions that are going to be made. So the vulnerable or durable questions that we ask, but I will end with the opening statement that Jonathan made. It's only the beginning, and we're a long way from knowing what the end is. So we'll continue to maintain the dialogues around this. Thank you so much to the three panelists, to the keynote, Jennifer for moderating this, and always to PNW BOCES as a partner in the relationship with the doctoral program. So thank you all.